How does a localized mechanical error cascade into an event that shifted the trajectory of global nuclear power? In 1986, the Chernobyl power complex sat isolated deep within Soviet Ukraine. It was a product of the Cold War, cut off from international safety standards and operating in a culture of extreme secrecy. At the center of this complex were massive RBMK-1000 reactors. These were unique, Soviet-designed machines that used graphite to moderate the core and boiling light water for two distinct purposes: to cool the uranium fuel and to generate the steam that drove the turbines. This diagram illustrates the RBMK's positive void coefficient. Liquid water absorbs stray neutrons. As water boils into steam voids, less liquid absorbs neutrons, causing fission to spike. At low power, this creates a rapid, uncontrollable feedback loop of steam, reactivity, and heat. The operators running the plant were never informed of this specific hazard. The Soviet engineering culture had not articulated the danger of maintaining low power margins to the personnel working at the controls. April 26th grew from the mathematical certainty of operators flying blind within a system designed with uncommunicated vulnerabilities. Early on in the morning of April 26th, the crew at Reactor Unit 4 prepared for a routine test. They needed to determine how long the turbines would continue to spin and supply power to the main circulating water pumps if the plant lost its primary electrical supply. To force this test to proceed, the operators took a series of risky actions. Crucially, they disabled the automatic shutdown mechanisms that would have safely aborted the procedure. Realizing the reactor had slipped into an unstable condition, the operators finally moved to shut it down. They attempted to reinsert the control rods, but a peculiarity in the rod's design caused an immediate, massive power surge as they entered the core. Hot, fragmented fuel instantly interacted with the remaining cooling water. Steam generated at an explosive rate, and internal pressure skyrocketed past the reactor's physical limits. The overpressure snapped the fuel channels. A catastrophic steam explosion ripped through the core, detaching the 1,000-ton cover plate and rupturing the fuel assemblies. Seconds later, a second explosion ejected fragments of fuel channels and red-hot graphite blocks into the night sky, exposing the core to the open atmosphere. The incandescent graphite started a series of fires. Over the next 10 days, these blazes would push roughly 14 exabecquerels of radioactive material outward into the environment. Surviving crew members injected hundreds of tons of water per hour into the intact half of the reactor, trying to stop the structural damage from reaching the neighboring units 1 and 2. The RBMK's design ensured that severe damage to just 3 or 4 fuel assemblies would result in total structural annihilation. The first casualties were the firefighters who responded to the initial alarms. They battled the blazes on the turbine building roof, completely unshielded, absorbing massive doses of radiation in minutes. Doses exceeding 700 milligrays cause acute radiation syndrome, leading to severe burns and systemic failure. By the end of July, 28 first responders and plant personnel had died from ARS. To decontaminate the site, the Soviet Union mobilized hundreds of thousands of liquidators. These men manually cleared highly radioactive debris using minimal protective gear. Meanwhile, the 45,000 residents of the nearby town, Pripyat, were not evacuated until a full day after the explosion. Over the coming weeks, a 30-kilometer exclusion zone was established, forcing the relocation of well over 100,000 people. The open core threatened to inflict far worse damage across the continent. The physical sacrifice of the liquidator crews was the primary barrier standing in its way. As the fires burned, radioactive materials, primarily the short-lived iodine-131 and the long-lived cesium-137, were caught in the wind and carried across Europe. This chart compares the documented health impact of that fallout against popular fears. The United Nations and the World Health Organization found an increase of roughly 5,000 treatable thyroid cancers in children. Beyond that, decades of data show no evidence of a major radiation-induced public health crisis or genetic mutations passed to the next generation. The UN identified a paralyzing fatalism among the affected population, where fear and stress-related disorders proved more widespread than the physical effects of radiation. This extended far beyond the exclusion zone. One hematologist estimated that over 1 million abortions were performed in the Soviet Union and Europe because of incorrect medical advice regarding radiation and birth defects. The most unexpected legacy of the disaster lies immediately around the reactor, within the thousands of square kilometers that were rapidly abandoned by humans. The absence of humans allowed the contaminated zone to become a uniquely thriving biodiversity sanctuary. Empirical data shows that mammalian populations are abundant, proving a biological resilience to chronic radiation when the pressure of human activity is removed. The political landscape was forced to adapt. The disaster necessitated an end to Soviet nuclear secrecy, triggering collaboration with Western engineers, the redesign of RBMK reactors, and creating global safety oversight bodies. Mikhail Gorbachev later stated the Chernobyl accident was a more important factor in the fall of the Soviet Union than his programs of liberal reform. To manage the ongoing threat, the international community funded the new safe confinement arch, completed in 2017. It is the largest movable land-based structure ever built, designed to seal away the original concrete sarcophagus and its contents for a century. Yet the site remains an active hazard. In February 2025, a drone strike breached a roof of the confinement structure. While radiation levels remain stable, the damage necessitates a decade of further repairs. The site remains a record of systemic hubris, though the data gathered from the surrounding forests reveals nature's ability to recover from even the most severe technological failures.